The Gospel reading for this week comes from John chapter 11, and it's the account of Lazarus. And it talks about, John reminds us that Jesus had some friends, Mary, Martha, and their brother Lazarus. And at this stage in the story, Jesus has been stirring up trouble. He's caused a big scene at one of the festivals in Jerusalem. And so now he's off on the east side of the Jordan River, just keeping out of trouble, keeping out of sort of attention. And at this point, Lazarus becomes terribly ill. And so his sisters send a message to Jesus. Come and help us. Lazarus is ill. And yet, interestingly, Jesus doesn't immediately go, but he waits for 2 days. Then after 2 days, he heads with his disciples. And when they arrive, they're greeted with the news that Lazarus is dead and has been in the tomb for 4 days. And individually, each of the sisters come to him and say, Lord, if you'd have been here, our brother would still be alive. And as Jesus sees their sorrows, and as he sees the crowd around him, Jesus weeps. Which is interesting because Jesus knows that he's about to bring Lazarus back to life. In fact, he's told his disciples that that's what's going to happen. But Jesus is moved, and Jesus weeps. Just an interesting point. Probably the reason that Jesus waits 2 days is that even if he'd come back straight away, Lazarus would have been dead for 2 days. In the Jewish mindset, when a person died, their spirit hung around for 3 days. And then on the 4th day, the spirit left and they were thought to be totally dead. And so in this way, when Jesus comes and brings Lazarus back to life, here is a man that for all the Jewish audience there, they think this man is really dead. And so Jesus brings Lazarus back to life, which is amazing. But the key for us is that verse, wonderful verse to be a memory verse. Jesus wept. Because it reminds us of Jesus' compassion and love for his friends. In fact, one of the crowd standing there says, look at how much he loved Lazarus. It's an important story for us in times of trouble, in times of sorrow. Because it's easy for us in difficult times to ask, well, where is God? I remember back when the September 11 terrorist attacks happened in America. And shortly after, a number of books came out with titles like, Where is God? And yes, I don't want to know that you all weren't alive back then. Just stick with me. But in difficult times, we struggle, where is God? And yet, if you look at the biblical story, here is this God who creates human beings so they can be in friendship and relationship with him, and pretty quickly, they're off doing their own thing. And there's God who calls Abraham and this nation that he develops out of Abraham to be his people. And those people forget about him. He brings them out of Egypt and they sit there complaining. Oh, we wish we were back there instead of where you're taking to us to. He hears them when they're invaded by other nations and they call out to him, and he comes and he saves them, and fairly shortly after they've forgotten him again. Here is this God who comes in person of Jesus. And as he goes and teaches people, they don't get it. They say terrible things about him. Even his best friend denies even knowing him. He's taken by these human beings that he helped to create. He's spat on by them. He's beaten by them. And ultimately he hangs on a cross and dies. Where is God? Where is Jesus? They are in the pain. They are in the mess. Talked about last week, God is not this God up there watching, waiting for us to do the wrong thing and then waiting to zap us. But God is a God who sits there in our pain, in our hurt, in our sorrow. And God dwells there and weeps with us. And so may you know that we follow a God who loves us dearly. And when we are in pain, he is in pain. When we weep, he weeps with us. May you know that God is there with you. And may we at Unite and the church, and may you find chances to be God with others, sitting there and weeping and holding them. Reminds me of a story that a guy called Mark Iaconelli tells. And he tells this story of going out shopping just before Christmas because he realised he had to get presents for his family. And he's sitting in the food court and he notices this group that's come of mentally challenged young adults and their carers. And he watches, particularly as one young man has this coupon for McDonald's and goes and gets this big cup of coffee. He's so excited about this cup of coffee that he gets. And Mark Iaconelli doesn't think much more about it, and he goes, does the rest of his shopping, and he's heading out to the car park, and there's this huge rainstorm. And as he's waiting for the rain to ease, this group that he's seen in the food court comes out. And they're waiting there, and the carers are trying to keep them there as the bus pulls up, and they start to try and get these people quickly into the bus. And he sees this guy with his huge cup of coffee, and as he's heading towards the bus, the cup of coffee falls and he spills everywhere. And this man just collapses on the ground in tears. And Mark sees this man's carer sort of say to the others, quick, get the others on the bus. And she sits down there in the rain and the coffee mess, and she just holds him. And after a few minutes, she helps him up and helps him onto the bus. And they go, and Mark Iaconelli says he was just in tears, because that is the image of God that we follow. This God who weeps when his friends weep over Lazarus. This God who would weep with this man who's dropped his coffee. This is the God that we follow.